What happens when desperation collides with power? Angela Moore, a brilliant black woman pushed to the edge, steals $250,000 from New York's most ruthless billionaire, Paul Whitaker. But instead of calling the cops, he makes her an offer she can't refuse: work for him or face prison. What starts as revenge becomes obsession. What begins as hatred transforms into something far more dangerous: love. But when their secret is exposed, both will lose everything. Can two broken souls find redemption in each other's arms? This is the story of the black girl who stole the billionaire's money and his heart. If you love intense romantic dramas, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. You won't want to miss what happens next. The email arrived at 6:47 a.m., and Paul Whitaker's jaw tightened as he read the alert from his cybersecurity team. Someone had breached his encrypted financial system. Someone had stolen from him $250,000, transferred from an offshore account he'd kept hidden even from his own board of directors. The transaction had occurred at 11:34 p.m. the previous night, routed through 3 different banks before landing in an account registered to someone named D. Moore. Paul stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office. The Manhattan skyline stretched before him like a kingdom he'd conquered through ruthlessness and precision. In 7 years of building his tech empire, no one had dared to cross him. Competitors feared him. Employees worshipped or despised him, but always obeyed. And yet, someone had walked into his world and taken what was his. He pulled up the security footage from his penthouse. The cleaning staff had been there last night, standard procedure. But one face made him pause. The temp worker. The woman who'd looked at him 2 days ago with those defiant brown eyes when he'd snapped at her for moving papers on his desk. She'd met his glare without flinching, her chin lifted slightly, and said in a voice that rang with quiet dignity, "I was dusting, Mr. Whitaker. Not stealing your secrets." Angela Moore. The surname matched. Paul smiled, but there was no warmth in it. He picked up his phone and dialed his head of security. "Find Angela Moore. Bring her to my office at noon. Tell her it's regarding a business opportunity. And Marcus? Make sure she comes willingly. I want her relaxed when she walks through that door." Angela's hand shook as she signed Darius into the hospital's surgical wing. The nurse smiled kindly, explaining the pre-operation procedures while Angela nodded, barely hearing the words through the roar of panic in her mind. She'd done it. She'd actually stolen money from a billionaire. The weight of that decision pressed against her chest like a stone. But Darius was going to live. Her baby brother, 23 years old with his whole life ahead of him, would get the kidney transplant that insurance had denied 3 times. That had to be worth something. That had to matter. "Ms. Moore." The nurse touched her arm gently. "He's going to be fine. The surgeon is one of the best in the country." Angela managed a smile, blinking back tears. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her stomach dropped as she answered. "Ms. Moore? This is Marcus Chen, head of security for Whitaker Industries. Mr. Whitaker would like to meet with you today at noon regarding a potential employment opportunity. He was impressed with your work and professionalism during your recent assignment at his residence." The words were smooth, professional, revealing nothing. But Angela's blood turned to ice. He knew. He had to know. This was it, her life was over. I'm at the hospital right now. My brother." "Mr. Whitaker is aware of your family situation," Marcus interrupted, his tone still pleasant but leaving no room for refusal. "He's quite insistent. A car will pick you up at 11:30. The address is Methodist Hospital, correct?" Angela closed her eyes. "Yes." "Excellent. We'll see you soon, Ms. Moore." The line went dead. Angela stood in the sterile hospital corridor, watching through the window as nurses prepped Darius for surgery, and knew with absolute certainty that she'd made a deal with the devil. The only question was what price he'd demand. Paul watched Angela Moore walk into his office at exactly noon, and despite everything, he found himself appreciating her composure. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her natural hair pulled back, no makeup except for a touch of lip gloss. She looked exhausted, terrified, and beautiful in a way that made something shift uncomfortably in his chest. "Ms. Moore. Please, sit." He gestured to the chair across from his desk, noting how her eyes darted to the exits, calculating escape routes that didn't exist. She sat, back straight, hands folded in her lap. Waiting. Paul opened a folder and slid a printout across the desk. Bank transactions, timestamps, routing numbers. "Do you know what this is?" Angela's eyes scanned the paper, and he watched the color drain from her face. But she didn't cry. Didn't beg. She looked up at him with those same defiant eyes and said, "Yes." "Yes," Paul repeated, leaning back in his chair. "Not I don't know what you're talking about." "Not there must be some mistake." "Just a yes." He studied her for a long moment. "Why?" "My brother needs a kidney transplant." Insurance denied him. The hospital wanted payment up front. Her voice was steady, but her hands gripped each other tightly enough that her knuckles went pale. "I saw the account when I was cleaning your office. I know that doesn't make it right, but I wasn't going to let him die. So you decided to rob me." "I decided to save my brother." She met his gaze without flinching. "Go ahead. Call the police. I'll plead guilty. I just need 1 more hour. Darius goes into surgery at 2, and I need to be there when he wakes up." Paul stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. The rage he'd felt that morning had transformed into something more complex. He'd expected tears, manipulation, lies. Instead, he'd gotten raw honesty and a woman who'd committed a crime out of love rather than greed. "I'm not calling the police," he said finally. He heard her sharp intake of breath. "What?" "You took $250,000. At current market rates, that's approximately 5 years of salary for someone with your skills. So here's my offer, work for me for 5 years as my personal assistant. Your debt will be paid in full. Refuse, and I'll have you arrested before your brother's surgery is complete." Angela stood so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. 5 years? That's generous, Paul interrupted, turning to face her. "I could have you charged with felony theft, cyber fraud, and half a dozen other crimes that would put you in prison for a decade. 5 years of employment is a gift, Ms. Moore. I suggest you take it. I'd be trapped. Indentured. You'd be employed. Quite well paid, actually. I'll cover your brother's ongoing medical expenses, provide you with an apartment in the city, and pay you a competitive salary on top of working off your debt." He moved closer, watching emotions war across her expressive face. "Unless you'd prefer the alternative." Angela closed her eyes, and for the first time, he saw her armor crack. A single tear slid down her cheek before she roughly wiped it away. When she opened her eyes again, the fire had returned. "Fine. I'll work for you. But I'm not your slave, Mr. Whitaker. You want my time, you'll get it. But you can't buy my soul." Despite himself, Paul smiled, a real smile that felt foreign on his face. "I wouldn't dream of it, Ms. Moore. Your soul is the only thing about you I can't afford." He extended his hand. "Do we have a deal?" She stared at his hand for a long moment before taking it. Her palm was warm against his, and the handshake lasted a fraction too long before they both pulled away. "Deal," she whispered. "Excellent. You start Monday. Now go, your brother needs you." Paul returned to his desk, dismissing her with a wave. But as she reached the door, he called out, "Ms. Moore? For what it's worth, I hope the surgery goes well." She looked back, surprise flickering in her eyes. "Thank you." When she left, Paul sat in the silence of his office and wondered what the hell he'd just done. The first month was war. Angela arrived at 7 a.m. every morning and rarely left before 9 p.m. Paul worked her relentlessly, scheduling meetings, managing correspondence, researching competitors, accompanying him to dinners with investors who looked at her like she was decoration rather than the woman keeping Paul's entire schedule from collapsing into chaos. But she learned quickly. By week 3, she anticipated his needs before he voiced them. She memorized the names and preferences of his top 50 business contacts. She caught an accounting error in a merger proposal that would have cost him millions. And through it all, she maintained that quiet dignity that both infuriated and fascinated him. They fought constantly. "These projections are unrealistic," Angela said one evening, dropping a report on his desk with more force than necessary. Paul looked up from his laptop. "Excuse me." "The cue for projections for the European market. They're based on data from before the new privacy regulations. You'll never hit these numbers. I have a team of analysts who are telling you what you want to hear instead of what you need to know," she interrupted. "Look at the adjusted figures. I ran the calculations myself." Paul scanned the paper she'd added, his irritation shifting to surprise. She was right. Completely right. The projections were inflated by at least 30%. "How did you catch this?" "I read the reports you ignore because they're boring. The regulatory updates, the market analysis briefs, the..." "Why?" He stood, moving around the desk. "Why do you care? You're working off a debt, Angela. You could coast by doing the minimum." She held his gaze, unflinching. "Because I don't know how to do things halfway. And because if this company fails, I'm out of a job and Darius loses his medical coverage. So yes, I care. Even if I hate owing you." They stood close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and warm that reminded him of summer. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Angela stepped back, breaking whatever spell had fallen over them. "I'll email you the revised projections," she said quietly, and left his office before he could respond. Paul stood alone in the darkening office and realized with unsettling clarity that Angela Moore was the first person in 5 years who'd made him feel anything other than numb. It was Vivian Shaw who first sensed the shift. Paul's assistant for 3 years, Vivian had perfected the art of being indispensable while nurturing hopes that one day Paul would notice her as more than an efficient employee. She'd watched him at charity galas, cold and untouchable, and told herself she could be the one to thaw his frozen heart. Then Angela Moore arrived, and everything changed. "Paul, I prepared those contracts you requested," Vivian said one afternoon, entering his office without knocking as usual. She froze. Paul sat on the edge of his desk, jacket off, tie loosened, actually laughing at something Angela was showing him on her tablet. "The review is brutal," Angela was saying, grinning. "Listen to this." Mr. Whitaker's presentation had all the warmth of a tax audit conducted by robots. "I mean, they're not wrong." "I'm efficient," Paul protested, but he was smiling in a way Vivian had never seen. "You're terrifying," Angela countered. "There's a difference." Vivian cleared her throat loudly. Both of them looked up, and the easy intimacy of the moment shattered. Paul's expression shifted back to professional neutrality. "Vivian." "Thank you." "Leave them on my desk." "Of course." Vivian set down the folder, her eyes on Angela. "Ms. Moore, I wasn't aware your duties included media coaching." "They don't," Angela replied evenly. "I was just sharing something funny." "How nice." Vivian's smile was sharp as glass. "Paul, don't forget your dinner with the Hendersons tonight. 7:30 at Perse." "Actually," Paul said, and Vivian's stomach sank at his tone, "cancel that. Reschedule for next week. I'm working late tonight." "But Paul, they've been trying to get this meeting for months." "Next week, Vivian." His voice left no room for argument. Vivian left, but not before seeing the surprised look Angela gave Paul, and the small, satisfied smile he tried to hide. In that moment, Vivian Shaw decided that Angela Moore had to go. It happened on a Friday night, 3 months into Angela's employment. Paul had sent her home at 8 for once, insisting she needed rest. Angela had protested, They were preparing for a major board meeting, but he'd practically pushed her out the door with an exasperated, "Go, Angela. The company will survive one night without you." She'd left, but not before seeing something vulnerable in his expression. Something lonely. 2 hours later, her phone rang. Paul's name on the screen. "Hello? Angela." His voice was rough, strange. Can you come back to the office?" Her heart jumped. What's wrong? Did something happen with? Nothing's wrong with the business. A long pause. Never mind. It's late. I'm sorry for calling. Paul, wait. Angela was already grabbing her coat. I'm coming. 20 minutes. She found him on the balcony of his office, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at the city lights. He didn't turn when she approached. Today's the anniversary, he said quietly. 5 years since Rebecca died. Angela's breath caught. She'd heard rumors about Paul's dead fiancée, but he'd never spoken about her. I'm sorry. Car accident. We were supposed to get married that spring. He took a drink, and Angela noticed the bottle on the table was half empty. I was working late. As always. She called to say she was coming to surprise me with dinner. I told her I was too busy to go home. But she came anyway. His voice cracked. T-boned by a drunk driver 3 blocks from here. She died instantly. Paul, Angela moved closer, her hand hovering near his shoulder. Everyone thinks I'm cold because I'm a bastard. They're not wrong, but that's not why. He finally looked at her, and the raw pain in his eyes made her chest ache. I'm cold because feeling anything hurts too much. Because I killed the only person I ever loved by choosing work over her. You didn't kill her. A drunk driver did. I should have told her to stay home. I should have left work to have dinner with her. I should have loved her less. Angela interrupted gently. Worked less hard to build something impressive? Changed who you fundamentally are? Paul, Rebecca knew who you were. She loved you anyway. Her death was a tragedy, but it wasn't your fault. He stared at her, something shifting in his expression. How do you always know what to say? I don't. I'm making it up as I go. She took the glass from his hand and set it down. Come on. You need coffee and food, not more alcohol. Angela. No arguments. That's an order from your assistant. She tugged him toward the door, and to her surprise, he followed. They ended up at a 24-hour diner in Midtown, sitting in a cracked leather booth while Paul ate pancakes and Angela drank coffee. They talked about everything: his childhood in Connecticut, her years in Atlanta, Darius's love of terrible action movies, Rebecca's dream of opening an art gallery, Angela's abandoned painting career, Paul's fear that he'd forgotten how to be human. Somewhere around 3 a.m., Paul reached across the table and took Angela's hand. Thank you. For tonight. For not treating me like a monster. Angela looked at their joined hands, her heart doing something complicated and dangerous. You're not a monster, Paul. You're just someone who's been hurt and forgot how to heal. Maybe you're my healing, he said softly. She should have pulled her hand away. Should have reminded him that she worked for him, that their relationship was transactional, that she was only there because she'd stolen from him. Instead, she squeezed his fingers and whispered, maybe you're mine too. That night marked the beginning of something neither of them could name and both of them feared. Charles Vane noticed the change immediately. As head of Whitaker Industries' international division, Charles had access to financial systems that even Paul rarely monitored. For 2 years, he'd been skimming money through elaborate offshore accounts, confident that Paul's focus on innovation meant the books would never be scrutinized carefully enough to catch the discrepancies. But recently, Paul had been reviewing everything. And he'd assigned his new assistant, that more woman, to audit historical transactions. Charles couldn't allow that. He began investigating Angela, hiring a private detective to dig into her background. What he found was gold, a criminal willing to steal, a woman with a sick brother providing ongoing leverage, and best of all, a transfer from Paul's personal accounts directly into her family's medical fund. Perfect. Charles began building his case, doctoring documents, creating false communications, planting evidence that Angela and Paul had conspired to embezzle company funds. He'd destroy them both, take control of the company in the chaos, and walk away rich. He just needed the right moment to strike. Angela fell in love slowly, then all at once. It happened in stolen moments, Paul bringing her coffee exactly how she liked it, remembering she preferred Shakespeare to Austen, asking about Darius's physical therapy with genuine interest. It happened in late nights when they'd be working and his hand would brush hers, lingering a moment too long. It happened when she caught him watching her with an expression so tender it made her breath stop. "We can't do this," she said one night when they were alone in his office, his hand cupping her cheek, his face inches from hers. "I know," he whispered. "I work for you. I owe you money. The power dynamic is all wrong." "I know." "Paul." He kissed her. Soft and desperate and perfect, his other hand sliding into her hair, pulling her closer. Angela melted into him, all her objections dissolving as she clutched his shoulders and kissed him back with 5 months of pent-up longing. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Paul rested his forehead against hers. "I'll forgive the debt. Tomorrow. I'll have the lawyers draw up papers releasing you from our contract. You can leave, work anywhere you want, and we'll start over. Equal footing. You do that? Angela, I'd do anything for you." He kissed her again, softer this time. "I think I've been falling in love with you since the moment you refused to apologize for dusting my desk." She laughed, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I've been falling for you since you asked about Darius's surgery. I knew then that underneath everything, you were a good man. I'm not good. But I'm trying to be better. For you." They made love that night in his penthouse, slow and tender, learning each other's bodies like sacred texts. Afterward, Angela lay in Paul's arms, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, and allowed herself to believe in happy endings. The illusion lasted exactly 3 days. The scandal broke on a Tuesday morning with a front-page article in the Wall Street Journal Whitaker Industries CEO embezzles millions with criminal assistant. Angela woke to 57 missed calls and her apartment surrounded by reporters. Paul's lawyers arrived first, tight-lipped and terrifying, serving her with a subpoena. She was taken to the police station, fingerprinted, photographed, and thrown into a cell before she could even process what was happening. Paul came to see her that afternoon, looking haggard and furious. "I didn't do this," Angela said immediately through the bars. "Paul, I swear, I didn't." "I know." He gripped the bars, his knuckles white. "Charles Vane set us both up. He's been embezzling for years, and he's framed us to cover his tracks. The evidence is convincing. Bank transfers, forged emails, doctored accounting records. My lawyers say it's going to be hard to fight." "Then don't." Angela's voice broke. "Let them think I did it. You have too much to lose. Are you insane? You go to prison. You'd lose everything you've built. Your company, your reputation. I don't care." Paul shouted, and several guards looked over. He lowered his voice, but the intensity remained. "Angela, I love you. Do you understand that? I'm not losing you. We'll fight this together." But fighting together meant testifying, and testifying meant revealing the truth about Angela's initial theft. Paul's lawyers advised against it, admitting she'd stolen from him first would destroy any credibility they had. But as the trial date approached, Paul made a decision that would change everything. The courtroom was packed the day Paul Whitaker took the stand. Angela sat with her public defender, knowing she was going to prison. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Charles had done his work well. Even Vivian had testified against her, claiming she'd seen Angela accessing confidential files and acting suspiciously. The prosecutor was midway through his questioning when Paul did something unexpected. He interrupted. "I need to make a statement," Paul said loudly. The judge frowned. "Mr. Whitaker, that's not how. Angela Moore stole $250,000 from me 6 months ago." His voice rang through the courtroom. Gasps erupted. Angela's head shot up, tears streaming down her face. "She did it to save her brother's life, and when I discovered the theft, I didn't report it. Instead, I coerced her into working for me to pay off the debt. Our relationship was built on a power imbalance I created and exploited." "Paul, no," Angela whispered, but he continued. "Charles Vane has been embezzling from my company for 2 years. The accounts in question were hidden even from me, which is why I didn't notice the discrepancies until recently. When Angela began auditing our financial systems at my request, she found irregularities. That's when Vane set us up. But the underlying truth is that Angela is a thief, and I'm complicit. If you're going to prosecute someone, prosecute me." The courtroom exploded. The judge banged her gavel. The prosecutor looked like he might have a stroke. And Angela sobbed openly as Paul sacrificed everything to save her. His testimony changed the case. The investigation shifted to Charles Vane, whose carefully constructed fraud began to unravel under scrutiny. Within a week, Charles was arrested. Vivian, caught in her lies, was fired. And Angela, facing reduced charges due to Paul's confession and her cooperation, received probation and community service. But Paul paid the price. His board forced him out. Investors fled. The company he'd built from nothing was sold piece by piece. His reputation was destroyed. Angela tried to see him, but Paul had disappeared. His lawyers told her he'd left the country, that he'd asked her not to follow, that he wanted her to be free to live her life without the shadow of their scandal. She didn't believe that for a second. But she also couldn't find him. 6 months later, Angela Moore held her first art exhibition in a small Paris gallery, her work funded by an anonymous investor who'd believed in her talent. The collection was called Stolen Hearts, Abstract Pieces Exploring Love, Loss, Redemption, and Sacrifice. The opening night was crowded with art critics and collectors. Angela moved through the room, accepting compliments numbly, her heart somewhere across the ocean in a courtroom where a man had destroyed himself to save her. She was standing in front of her centerpiece, a massive canvas of 2 hands reaching for each other across a void, when she felt someone stop beside her. "You captured it perfectly," a familiar voice said. "The space between wanting and having. Between loving and losing." Angela turned, and there he was. Paul Whitaker, dressed in a simple suit instead of his usual designer clothes, his hair slightly longer, his eyes holding the same intensity but somehow softer. "Paul," she breathed. "I'm sorry I left without saying goodbye. I needed you to have space to heal, to build your life without me haunting it." He smiled sadly. "But I couldn't stay away tonight. I had to see what you'd created. You're my anonymous investor. Guilty. I hope you don't mind. I couldn't help myself, your talent deserves to be seen." Angela felt tears building. "You lost everything for me. I lost everything that didn't matter." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "And I gained the one thing that does. My soul. My humanity. The ability to love again. You gave me that, Angela. You stole my money, yes. But you also stole my heart. And you can keep it, if you want it. No strings, no contracts, no obligations. Just me. I want it," Angela whispered. "God, Paul, I've wanted it since the night we shared pancakes at 3 a.m. and I realized you were the most beautiful broken thing I'd ever seen. I'm not broken anymore. You fix me. We fixed each other." He kissed her then, soft and slow, in a Paris gallery surrounded by art that told their story. When they broke apart, Angela took his hand and led him to a quiet corner. "Darius is doing great, by the way. He asks about you constantly. I've been getting his updates from the hospital. I'm glad." Paul smiled. "What about you? Are you happy?" "I'm getting there. The art helps. But I missed you. Every single day. Then let's not miss each other anymore. He pulled her close. Start over with me, Angela. No billionaire and thief. No boss and employee. Just Paul and Angela, two people who found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something beautiful. I'd like that. They stood together as the party swirled around them, two souls who'd stolen from each other money, hearts, futures, and in the taking, found redemption. Outside, the Seine River reflected city lights like fallen stars. Inside, Angela sketched Paul on a napkin as he watched her with love in his eyes, and she thought about the strange alchemy of fate. How a desperate act of theft had led to the greatest treasure, a love that survived scandal, separation, and sacrifice. Paul, she said softly. Yes? Promise me something. Anything. Promise me this isn't a dream. That you're really here, and we get our happy ending. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. I promise. No more running. No more walls. Just us, together, for as long as you'll have me. Forever, then. Forever. And in a gallery filled with stolen hearts painted on canvas, two real hearts finally found their way home. ***, if this story moved you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling us what you thought of Paul and Angela's journey. And don't forget to subscribe, we've got more intense, emotional love stories coming your way that you absolutely don't want to miss. Your next favorite romance is just one click away, ***.